All right, I've been waiting for this one all week. Beyoncé dropped 2 new songs, and her music has forced a conversation about country music. It is one I'm delighted to have, so thank you, Beyoncé, for this. Today on the podcast, why are pop stars going country? The group chat is here. Let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, so normally on this day of the week, on this time of the week, we gather some of my favorite culture writers around the table, and then today we usually talk about a bunch of stuff at the end of the week. Today we're going to talk about one big thing because 5 days later, after we first heard it, we are still talking about this.
This ain't Texas. Ain't no hold 'em. So lay your cards down, 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 down. So park your Lexus and throw your keys up. Stick around, round, 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 round. Stick around.
That is Texas Hold'em. That is one of 2 songs that Beyoncé dropped in the middle of the Super Bowl. Then she announced that she's coming with an album. It's called Act 2, and we are getting a country album. Okay, there's a lot to talk about here. One, black artists have been trying to fight the white country establishment for a long time. So Beyoncé's arrival at this moment in this time means something, and we got to talk about what that means. But 2, Beyoncé's not the only pop star turning to country right now. I think there's something interesting going on there. I've got 3 music journalists here to help unpack all of this. Andrea Williams is here. Marissa Moss is here. Carl Wilson is here. Andrea, Marissa, Carl, welcome to the show. How's it going, everybody?
Hey.
Hi. I've been just buzzing, waiting for this conversation. Andrea, I'm going to start with you on this. What we're not going to do is pretend that the conversation about blackness in country is new, like some people are pretending. But with that being said, it feels like it's been pushed to a new level. It's been, a lot of people are paying attention to this conversation that maybe they weren't before. We've had a chance to live with these songs for a week now. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings about these songs, about the way they've created a conversation?
Yeah. I'm thinking Beyonce too, honestly. I'm excited. I felt kind of like, as we've had these conversations in the past, like I was screaming into a void a little bit.
Yeah.
I've long said that it might take people outside of Nashville to care about this in order to move us in another direction. In the same way, you don't have to be, Palestinian or Israeli or Jewish to care about what's going on in Gaza. And so I'm glad that we are able to have that conversation on another level now. I am not a critic, so I am not going to speak to, whether these are good songs,
Yes.
But I absolutely love the fact that Beyonce did Beyonce country songs. I think
Yes.
a lot of times we get people outside of country music that are like, well, I better go talk to Jay Joyce and Dan Huff if I want to do this country record. And if Hillary Lindsey's not on the project, then I don't have any well-written songs. And like all this stuff that makes it really difficult to get different voices and different styles that ultimately can push this genre forward, particularly when we're talking about Black artists in it. So that Beyonce was like, yo, I might come to Nashville or I might not. And I might use Nashville people and I might not. I would definitely say too, I hope there are a lot more Nashville folks on the album. We've only seen 2 tracks thus far, maybe some folks that, I think Beyonce's done a good job in the past, whether we're talking about Black businesses or other creatives and kind of uplifting folks who need it. So I hope we see more of that. But yeah, I'm just excited that she did her own version of this that is very Beyonce and very Black and kind of, not kind of, but really says, I don't need your system, right? Because as Marissa and I have talked many times, the system is the problem. And she's shown that you don't actually need the system.
Yeah, there's always like this tendency to sort of focus on specific artists, but it is in fact the system that is a problem. Marissa, you're also based in Nashville. It's the epicenter of the music industry. It's kind of the place that people refer to when they talk about the gatekeepers in this particular industry. And then here comes Beyonce, and she's shooting for the top, right? She's at the top of the iTunes charts. She's at all of the Spotify country playlists. What do you make of this? What do you make of the immediate reception to Beyonce in the space?
I mean, I think it's awesome. I don't know. It's been such a whirlwind couple of days since this song came out, and just kind of following the roller coaster ride of how people are reacting to it, how Nashville's reacting to it. I love the songs. I mean, they're it's so fun to have these songs in the mix
Yes.
too. I mean, there's a great piece in Vulture just talking about how fun these songs are too.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's Beyonce. So everything is going to be on a different level that I think, and that's kind of the fun thing, that I think if something is going to be bigger than Nashville and bigger than Music Row thinks it wants to be or is, it's going to be Beyonce. And that is, you know, like it's an amazing thing to bring into the mix because she's able to ride above all of the BS in this town because she comes in at the level that she does. And that's, you know, it's an awesome kind of flip to finally have on things, I think. But yeah, it's been a ride. It's been a ride.
I've been sort of really taken by how much conversation this has created because I think like there have been Black artists, particularly in the last 5 years or so, really pushing the conversation when it comes to Blackness and country. And then you get to the Beyonce moment, and it feels like suddenly there is a wide audience for this, and people are listening in ways that I have to imagine, like if you've been trying to have this conversation for a minute, if you've been Mickey Guyton, if you've been Reese Palmer, you're like, where were y'all? Where were you guys over the last, 3 years, over the last 10 years, over the last 20 years, as we've continued to have this conversation? Andrea, what's your sense? Is because to me, what I'm sort of seeing is there's a lot of excitement that Beyonce has kind of put her thumb on the scale, which is to say, she's kind of reoriented the conversation to say, you know what? It's time to sort of have this out in the open, as opposed to having these Black women try to continue to have this conversation without anybody listening to them.
Yeah, it's Beyonce can do that, as Marissa said. And I think it's important, but it is tough. Chris Willman, I don't know if y'all saw it. He did a Variety piece last night where he talked to some folks in radio, and it broke my heart. And I am not a country artist. Like, this notion that oh yeah, we've been pumping millions of dollars into radio tours for all these years, and we've been telling people it's going to take a year to work your song up the charts, and you might still never get there. And now it's like we're grabbing wave files online because it's Beyonce. Like, you don't even actually have to service us. Is horrible. Now, it's confirmation for what I and so many other people have been saying, which is that none of this is real and it's all a construct. And at any moment, we can tear this down and go our own way. But it has to break your heart, right? We go back to 2020. We go back to Mickey Guyton. Even if country radio felt some kind of way about Black Like Me, because it was a little too on the nose for the white folks. Even everything that came out after that, she got no love. Like, she did 2 Tyler Hubbard records that got no love. And now, yes, there's a Beyonce element that I think even Mickey would acknowledge. But the larger point is like, y'all will throw the rules away when y'all get ready to. Y'all just never wanted to do it before. So how do we start to unpack that? How do we make sure when Beyonce has moved on to Act 3 that we are not just falling back on this arbitrary garbage and then doing more of the same?
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated about that conversation. I want to come back to that in just a moment, but I also want to place this Beyonce moment in this larger cultural context. Beyonce is not the only pop star that is moving into country right now. Take a listen.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River.
So close the door and change the channel. Give me something I can handle. Like a lover or someone that's nice to me.
You could set my truck on fire and roll it down a hill, and I still wouldn't trade it for a coupe. I got a lick for a bit that never has.
All right, so what you just heard there is a little medley. Lana Del Rey, she's got a rendition of John Denver's Take Me Home Country Roads. Maggie Rogers, new single, Don't Forget Me. And then Post Malone, he did a song with Morgan Wallen and Hardy. Lana and Post have both said that their next albums are going to be country records. Maggie has collaborated with people like Zach Bryan in the last year or so. Kylie Minogue is hinting that she might get in on the action. Carl, what is happening here? What do you think is pushing all these pop singers in the world of country right now?
Yeah, it's pretty striking. I mean, I think there are a few different angles on what's driving all of this, and it comes from several different directions.
Hmm.
I think that there's been a brewing thing, and certainly everything that Marissa and Andrea were just talking about is part of that, like the conversation inside country music. But in 2019, with, I would say, Beyonce's sister Solange's album, which was surrounded by cowboy imagery and like
Yeah.
bringing what was called the Yeehaw agenda at the time, if we remember that,
Yes.
kind of a fashion excavation of Black cowboy history. With that same year, Old Town Road, Lil Nas X breaks, and this whole conversation about Billboard not putting that in the country charts really broke out into the public. A lot of this conversation about people of color in country music and the history of that. And a third thing that year was Ken Burns' country music series on PBS, which did delve into some of that history and raise some awareness. And then the pandemic came, right? So we've got like 4 years build up, a couple of those years when nothing could happen. And, Beyonce's talked about how both Renaissance Act 1 and Act 2 have been pandemic conceived projects.
Yeah.
And so you think that she was probably responding. But then, like, let's talk about what's been happening in country, where bro country has kind of been on the decline for the past few years. And streaming is challenging radio's stranglehold on deciding what gets popular. And we're starting to see, not necessarily people of country and women, people of color and women, but, unconventional country stars like Jelly Roll or Tyler Childers or Zach Bryan breaking through what the gatekeepers want because people streaming are expressing their interest. And finally, let's talk about what's happening in pop, where there's been kind of a low energy time for the past few years.
Yeah.
And when that happens in pop, people look for other wells of inspiration to draw on. For 20 years, that's mostly been in hip hop. And I think in some ways, freshening up your sound by making it more hip hop is kind of a played out move. And so they're looking to the other big, what we might call one of the two solitudes of American pop music, country music, as a fresh well of inspiration. So I think all of those things together are kind of creating this moment. And we saw the beginning of it last year where there was a series of crossover country hits, not all ones that we might have been happy to see, but certainly a level of attention to country from the pop audience that's unusual. And we had that moment with Luke Combs and Tracy Chapman on the Grammys last week that kind of represented the best possibilities of that. And so I think that we're seeing that, like, there really is a moment coalescing that's a little out of control of the usual Nashville gatekeepers that we've been talking about.
Marissa, it might actually do us a good service here to spend a moment setting up the way that radio controls what happens in country. Because I think if you look at any other genre, that understanding of how dominant radio is as a force, you go, what are you talking about? What do you mean radio is so central to who becomes a star in country? But country is kind of built differently. Do you want to just maybe spend 30 seconds or a minute setting up how significant, the radio pipeline is?
Yeah, and I know that's kind of exactly as you said, can be a little shocking and sound a little weird for people that aren't really engaged in the country space. Like exactly as you said, really, country radio is still that important. Yeah. It is the thing that all of Music Row, and I say Music Row to kind of talk specifically about the Nashville infrastructure that is controlling all of this.
Yeah.
That's, the sun at the center of Nashville. Everything revolves around it. It is the litmus test for market share, for success in terms of who's headlining festivals, who gets the promo deals, all of those things. Whether we like it or not, that is how everyone structures, their business investments, their promo dollars on radio. And labels will make it like, oh, radio is in charge. They're in charge of what we decide. But if you talk to radio, they will say, no, labels are in charge. It's their promo budget. It's what's service to us. They're in charge. Everyone's blaming everyone else on who has the control. Nobody wants to take accountability for anything, really.
Yeah.
But really, they're all working together to ensure the success of basically, 99% cis het white men and one chosen blonde woman, usually. And like Andre was saying earlier, like it was so ridiculous to me also, like reading that article that you mentioned by Chris Willman, where he talks about, oh, like we can play this song without, exactly as you were saying, without being serviced properly by the labels, which is how you get your song out. So you do an official ship date and it goes out to all the radio stations and they add it into their playlist.
Mhm.
I remember during Old Town Road, and I remember during Mickey Guyton's Black Like Me, I was talking to a lot of the radio programmers and they were like, well, the big problem is we can't add this song because it hasn't been properly serviced to us. And we can't really rip a copy because the sound quality is going to be crummy. And like, it's not really our fault. Like, we
They
just
have
don't
no
have it. They
urgency when it
never,
comes to adding,
like,
right? Like,
I don't
yeah.
know how many programmers I spoke to about Mickey Guyton's, not just Black Me, multiple songs being like, we can't find them in the service. Like, this is so hard. They weren't properly shipped to us on a gold and silver platter. And
Yeah.
now they're going on record saying like, it's Beyonce. We'll do whatever we can. We'll get it. No problem. Like, we would always be this open to playing a Black woman, like no problem.
Yeah.
And so it just like constant tells. But yes, the country radio is still what everyone revolves around and worships. At any
Yeah.
moment, it could be broken, and we just choose not to. We just choose to play the same game.
First of all, let me just tell folks, if you're just joining us, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. On today's podcast, we're talking about the challenges and the conversations that have kind of come up after Beyonce dropped 2 country songs, and it has kind of changed how we talk about country, at least for this week, which is, to my mind, a relief. To the mind of a lot of people, a relief. Andrea, there was a report this week of this Oklahoma radio station refusing to play Texas Hold'em after a listener emailed in a request. Then there was this sort of social media outcry, and then the program director said, actually, we didn't know that Beyonce just put out a country song, and now they are playing Texas Hold'em. What do you make of that? What do you make of that in conversation with what Marissa just said about the stronghold that country radio has?
Yeah, initially I'm like, dude, how do you not know? But I mean, maybe he crawled
could
under
live
a
under a
rock
rock,
for a
it's
few,
possible.
you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
sure.
Like he could have. I don't know. But yeah, I think the major takeaway as we talk about country radio and Beyonce is the fact that they are, for what it looks like now, moving everything that they've ever been, told us that how they did business. I talked to people during the Black Like Me era as well. It was, we've got our preset inventory. We had no, so before you get the service date and the impact date and all that, like generally speaking, they know when something's coming. So even though they haven't plugged it in yet, right? Like they're starting to think about what these playlists are going to look like potentially March, April, whatever. We didn't know. We've got our inventory already built out. It was like there was no movement whatsoever. And now we're seeing that none of that is the case. And to the point of it being, I think one of the most heartbreaking parts about it, and I think about when I read it, I think about Reese and I think about Mickey and I think about all these women before. It was like, yeah, we've always been open to Black women. We've said that for so long. It just had to be the right one. It had to be the one with, the right song and the right, appeal and all of that. And it's like, I mean, people love Beyonce, but that it's very difficult for people to hear that because to Marissa's point, everybody passes the buck in this town. It's never the A&R people at the label will tell you they can't sign you because radio won't play you, and so much of their profits and how they do business is tied to radio. Radio's going to say, I can't play you if the labels don't sign you. So what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
It's all a game. It's not real. We're seeing that now. I hope we get to that part of the conversation where we're like, thanks, Beyonce. Let's figure out how to keep some of this Beyonce fans here, right? I experienced it yesterday because I posted some stuff and I was like, oh, this is what it looks like when you post about Beyonce. I didn't say anything bad, so I haven't been doxxed or anything yet, which is good. But it's also like, yo, how do we hold on to these people, right? So that we can build a sustainable audience for Black artists. I think the part of the issue too, why Black artists end up in limbo is because they haven't had access to that Black artist. That Black audience, because I saw so many people online Sunday that were like, I've never even heard of Charlie Pride, right?
Oh, wow.
But then you can't access the pre-built audience that country music has built, which is white and goes through those traditional channels. So you end up in no man's land. So if we can figure out how to maintain, how to cultivate, and even grow this audience that Beyoncé has brought over, and people are excited about Black country music, now I think we can get somewhere even outside of the industry, which is quite frankly where we still are.
First of all, a word, thank you. Second of all, I think like there is this is the thing that Beyonce does, right? Like what I'm interested in, Carl, is this larger conversation about the impact of Hurricane Beyonce. And she did this with Act One when, you know, Renaissance came out, and suddenly we were having refocusing conversations about who really invented house, who really invented the genres that she was working in, who really innovated these genres and brought them to life. And I guess like with this album, you begin to see a little bit more of what the project of Renaissance is, which is to say it is a corrective to the record. It is saying, here is a genre that you believe to be predominantly done by white people. As a matter of fact, we were there at the beginning and we are the innovators of it. I'm interested in how you see that fitting in with the general Beyonce mission statement and how we see Beyonce as an artist.
Well, you know, I mean, Beyonce's, you know, through her whole solo career been a kind of conceptual artist, right? That's built up and built up over time. Lemonade certainly was like one kind of culmination of that. And then this new phase, I mean, partly it's called Renaissance because it's a new phase in that way, but it's also like asserting herself as a Renaissance woman, and in some ways asserting Black culture as a Renaissance culture in that way of that incorporates all of the skills, all of the genres. And that's a project that's going on. And the amazing, exciting thing that's very rare to happen in pop music is to have someone who acts as a cultural historian having this level of visibility and power and using it in this way. You know, it's when Andrea was talking just now, I had the vision of Beyonce as like in Scooby-Doo, the moment when somebody reaches in and takes the mask off the villains, right? And Beyonce's playing that role in some ways. How deep that runs, you know, at least some part of a generation is going to get educated about these things. Whether that changes the course of future country history and its relationship to other musics, you know, remember, you know, we've had these kind of crossover moments before, and like Urban Cowboy in the 80s or Line Dancing in the 90s didn't like reconcile the American North and South, right?
Yeah.
So we should keep our expectations somewhat modest.
Well, I was going to say, Marissa, when you sort of look at this moment, what do you imagine is going to be the long-term impact of Beyonce's release on the industry? Or is it even too early to say, because like we're 5 days into this and country music is kind of notoriously a slow changing industry?
Yeah, I mean, again, like I don't want to put too much weight on Beyonce's shoulder to like do all of this work for everyone, and especially, you know, not accounting for all the work that has been going on for so long before Beyonce released this album. But I have to have a lot of hope, I think, in what she can there's something magical, I think, about opening up other fans to country music. I'm always like looking for ways to go around the systems here, because I think we've learned, and we've talked about on the show, is that they're so broken, and yet we refuse to break them enough to break out of them. We have to find some other way. There has to be some other way for artists that aren't just Beyonce, that are Black women in Nashville trying to make music and have their music heard. There has to be a way for them to get to the fans, if it's not going to be country radio, if it's not going to be artist label signing them, you know, increase the audience, increase the visibility for these other artists. Like, what if, you know, I was talking with someone yesterday, like imagine like a 3-day festival that Beyonce could put on, where there's like small stages and big stages with country artists, like all across the spectrum, Black country artists. Like, there's so much possibilities. Again, I don't want to like, you know, task Beyonce with solving all of the problems that like we have screwed up, and like that is not her problem to fix. But there are a lot of doors that I think can be open, and also just having a way to like, it's so valuable to be able to call these people on their BS, you know?
We got to leave it there because I literally have 20 seconds left. But Andrea, Carl, and Marissa, this was great. I could honestly keep talking about this forever. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. And that is it for the podcast today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Hey, we are going to be back next week. I would be delighted to see you then if you're around. I don't know. What are you going to do? Hang out with us.